Wes Rucker joins us, covers Tennessee for the 24/7 sports site. Kind enough to spend a few minutes with us this afternoon. Wes, you tweeted on Monday, I think it was, that the level of electricity in and around Knoxville, really going back to Sunday afternoon after the win against South Carolina, was off the charts. You've been around college football for a while. There's nothing quite like that buzz in a college town that's the build-up for a game.
Yeah, it's fun, and it's something that honestly at Tennessee, it's been reserved more for some big basketball games recently, if we're being honest. It's been a while since there's been that much electricity, and yeah, I took my wife out for what we call the Fantastic Lady Day on Sunday. There, we don't get a lot of chances to do that during the season, so do the whole go to brunch, go see the Bond movie, get some ice cream, walk around, and just downtown, because Tennessee's campus, for people who haven't been, is basically bumped up against downtown Knoxville, which is metro area over like 1 million people, so it's a pretty big town. But you could just sense like people walking around. Maybe it's because it's unseasonably warm. The Vols are putting up a lot of points on offense. There's just a lot of buzz right now in the town, and I think for all that momentum getting there when Lane Kiffin, his homecoming comes up here this weekend, yeah, it should be rocking in there.
What's the general consensus among Tennessee fans, like in the way that they think about Lane Kiffin, and maybe this week is a little bit different than a normal week?
Sure, I think you're probably looking at some maybe depends on how old you are. I think I think younger people tend to understand this is the business and that's the way it goes. And, Tennessee has been struggling for a lot of their existence as fans. People who are older think about Tennessee as the program that's still, I think, top 10 nationally all time in wins. It only had two head coaches for a 30-something year period. And then you had a guy come in from the West Coast for 1 year and then he leaves. Not going to be a popular guy. People don't think of Tennessee as a place that you leave because you want to. They think of Tennessee football as a place where you either do your job or you get fired or you leave in the grave. I mean, that's kind of how, the older generation sees it. So I think some time has passed, so things have softened a little bit. But I think for this weekend, there's going to be a lot of vinegar back in there. I think there's going to be, it should be rocking. It should be hostile on Saturday. It should be fun.
So Ole Miss rarely travels to Knoxville. It's 2010 since they've been. I think it's only 6 or 7 games since 1983. And so, and Tennessee's won every game that they've played in Knoxville since 1983. So Ole Miss has not really gotten the Neyland Stadium experience. And I feel like not a lot of people have in recent years because it maybe there hasn't been as much to cheer about. Sold out, a lot of excitement. What is that experience like for a visiting team? Does it compare to Baton Rouge or to Tuscaloosa or to Florida Field when it is completely packed in and folks are locked in?
It absolutely does. And I think actually from a decibel standpoint, sometimes it can get even louder because for people who haven't been, most of the 100,000 seat stadiums in sports and in college football, they kind of fan out a little bit. Neyland goes straight up. I mean, it's like Castle Grayskull. I mean, it just kind of looms on the horizon there. And you kind of get like a Coliseum vibe where, fans are right on top of you. They're packed in together and it's several stories tall. It's a tall structure. And that creates a bowl effect that has a lot of noise. I mean, I remember to this day, if you ask Baker Mayfield about it, he'll tell you it's the loudest place he's ever played football. When Oklahoma came, he couldn't hear the guy next to him. The guard couldn't hear the center. Tackle couldn't hear the guard. And they had to do hand signals for everybody else because they just couldn't hear anything. I heard the same from Cal players years ago when they made their visit to Knoxville, Oregon, same thing. People in the SEC kind of get used to it a little bit because it's not that much louder, than the average place. But still on its night, especially at night, people around here, they'll drink sour mash for breakfast. They'll get ready for a noon game. But for a 7:30 game, Eastern time, you're kicking off under the lights. I mean, it's going to be loud. Now, the challenge for Tennessee is carrying that momentum in through the course of the 60-minute game, but going into it, it's going to be pretty bonkers.
Talked to Bob Kessling earlier this week and asked him this question. I'm curious your perspective. The 28-0 start against Missouri and against South Carolina, it kind of carried through against Missouri. Last week, not so much. Was that a foot off the gas thing, or did something change in the course of the game that made Tennessee maybe a little less effective offensively in the final 45 minutes as opposed to the first 15?
But you're right. I mean, nothing Missouri did anything to change it. I mean, Missouri did some of the dumbest defensive formations I've ever seen trying to stop it. And whatever they were trying, it wasn't working. South Carolina, I think Tennessee did back off the gas a little bit, and that's really all it takes. But also, I think on top of it, and I'm sure Ole Miss fans and Ole Miss people can relate to this, the pace at which Tennessee plays is like the pace at which Ole Miss plays. And there is no one else in Power 5 football other than those two programs that play at that pace. And it can hit you like a jackhammer coming out of the gates. And you can't get your scout team ready for that. Your scout team can't get you ready. It's not like you can sit there with your scout team with a whiteboard in an hour and say, all right, here's what they do. And by the way, do all this at a million miles per hour, do it from all these different formations, snap it after 3 seconds. You just can't get your scout team to get you ready for that. So I think it takes people time to adjust to that. What's interesting about this game is that Ole Miss and Tennessee are the only two defenses in college football that practice at this pace every day. I don't know what Ole Miss does. I'll be honest with you. Tennessee does good on good pretty much every day. So this defense sees this offense on a daily basis at this pace. But Ole Miss probably sees a lot of it too, at least going into scrimmages and things like that. So that makes the first quarter much more interesting to me because Tennessee's got like a 101-13 advantage in the first quarter of games this year. Just mind-boggling because teams are not ready for how fast they go.
Tyon Evans, back-to-back 100-yard games. I think he's got 3 on the season, banged up a little bit. What do we expect from him? What do we expect from Jabari Small?
Well, everything that you take, and I've had nothing but good interactions with Josh Heupel. I think he's a pretty good dude, to be honest with you. But when you ask him about injuries, he's never going to be specific, and he might lie to you. He might just, there's not probably a nicer way to say it, obfuscate, dance around. He just won't tell you. Because I think to be understanding of the situation, I think Tennessee had less than 60 scholarship players available for South Carolina. So they are thin in some areas, really, really thin. And so any advantage they have, they think they might have, they keep it themselves. And I can understand that. To the best of my knowledge, though, Tyon Evans has progressed throughout the week. He's done more maybe than they expected to this point. Heupel said he'll know a little more Friday, Saturday morning. I expect pretty much all the Tennessee players who didn't sit out last week, except Juwan Mitchell, he's out for the year. The rest of them, this would be the game to push them. For 2 or 3 weeks now, they've been cautious with guys. Tyler Barron up front's a huge player for them, and they've only kind of used him for emergency situations for a couple of weeks. I think this is the game where they go ahead and fire every bullet they have, and if then you'll worry about Alabama later on. But I think, to answer your question, Small, his shoulder, it's a week-to-week deal, probably surgery after the season. But I think they'll both try to go. And plus, Small's a Memphis kid. He's going to try to go in this game. But Evans is a big player for them, and I think he'll give it a go.
I'm not big on asking guests for predictions, per se. I'm not asking you to do a score prediction. We did have a handicapper on a little while ago who said 58-52, which would blow away that 83-point total. That seems a little bit insane. I am curious, though, when you look at it, how do you think it plays out? Is it the track meet shootout that everybody's kind of talked about?
I know this, you don't want to get behind either of these offenses because what Tennessee does offensively, Hendon Hooker, he's the most efficient passer in the SEC, but he is a much, much, much different player when the threat of the run is in play. If Tennessee gets off to a good start and gets ahead a little bit and Ole Miss has to really worry about the run and the pass the whole time, that opens up the entire field for Hooker, and he's a very dynamic athlete, a very dynamic player. If you have to rely solely on his arm, the numbers look good, but you just watch the eye test. Virginia Tech, there's a lot of film on him out there, and you don't want to be in that position. So whoever gets out to a huge start or a big start in this game, I think has an advantage. Because if you're having to chase, trying to get some stops when these offenses can run and throw at you, that's not where you want to be for either one of these teams. So I think the first 15 minutes are going to be huge. But it's funny because actually, you mentioned Bob. I talked to Bob this morning, just passing him on campus. And I said, Bob, there's no way this isn't a track meet, right? Like you look at these teams, and Tennessee's defense, to be fair, has been a little bit better than Ole Miss's on paper, just to be fair, but not great. Better than I expected, certainly, but not great, but pretty good. But sometimes in these games you expect all these points and you just don't get them. It's hard for me to see that not happening in this game. At least one of these offenses, and maybe both of them, should put up some points and yards when you look at the matchups. So I think That's interesting because you do have a through line there with Levy. He's been the coordinator for both of these head coaches. They know each other very well. They played when they were at Florida Atlantic and UCF. They know each other. They know what they want to do. So they're going to throw some wrinkles at each other. I just, to me, one of these teams at least has got to be scoring 40 points in this game, right?
I would think. Storylines are fantastic. The build-up is great. The weather's going to be perfect on Saturday night. Looking forward to this one. Wes, thanks so much for your time today.
No problem. It's been in like the mid-80s today. I think it's going to cool off for Saturday, though, so that'll be nice.
Yeah. Oh, and congratulations. Soon to be a Pops as well. Congratulations on that.
Yeah, knock on wood, right? Yeah, a few weeks away. Yeah, doing great. So I did the easy part. The work's on her, but, thank you anyway. I appreciate it.
There you go. Sports Talk Mississippi. That's Wes Rucker from the Tennessee 24/7 site. Ole Miss and Tennessee coming up on Saturday.